I want to give a shout out to the dads, right? We got the dads out there? Yeah. It's our day. One day. We get to be the boss. One day. Usually that one day only lasts for lunch, right? Then it's over. We go back to being dads that don't really matter. No, I don't want no sympathy though. I want no sympathy. I ain't crying, whining. It's just, that's how it is in the real world, you know. That's okay. Here's what I want to do. Mike's been doing this series, Undivided. And the lead passage in that is in your worship folder, Galatians 3. I hope you guys got the right worship folder in there. You got and then do you have the Good Samaritan story in there? Yes, I didn't. I grabbed the wrong one, so that's good. Okay. So in that passage I'm going to come to at the end of the teaching. Today the title is Who's Your Neighbor? Unmasking Racism with Kingdom Living. And I was going to tell you a couple different stories. I was teasing my wife. I said what I was going to do is ask all of you to please stand if you've ever said or thought a racial slur, and she had that faith. And I said, no, I won't do that. I won't do that to you. I won't do that to you. And then I was whining a little bit, because I do whine. And I want you to look around and see how many black folks is up in this church, right? And guess who's doing the racism talk? Guess who chose me? Guess who bowed out on this talk? Some white guy bowed out. He didn't want to speak to racism, right? So he asked the black guy, the only one of 2 or 3 black guys in the church, could you do this, man? Hey. But seriously, I'm not up here to talk to you about political racism or to pound the gavel about some psychological notion about racism. What I want to do is ask you to think about the passage, the Good Samaritan story, and I'll read it after I tell the story. I want you to think about the passage, and I'm going to ask you this morning to do something tough. I'm going to ask you to think about your own bias. And I say that not to point fingers, but I say that in terms of, I think that this passage, when you read it, it requires something radical from us. Okay? Radical. I heard the story. There was this African American man who was from up north, Minnesota, somewhere like that. And he had a friend in Mississippi. Jumped on a bus, went down to visit his friend in Mississippi. In this little town, he was out walking about with some people he had met because he has acquaintances. He'd been going down there on a regular to visit a friend and his kids and some friends he'd seen. And this particular day, he was down there and he saw something. He witnessed a crime. And in this particular town, the crime that he witnessed, the cops came and they weren't defending justice. They were defending crime. And they asked this gentleman, there were 2 cops that pulled up. And one cop pulls out his gun and he asked this gentleman, did you see anything? And the gentleman said, well, I was standing here. I saw something, but I know that I don't see nothing right now. And while he was talking with this one white cop, the other cop came with a whip and started snapping it. And he said, you know, down here in the South, we do things a little differently. He said, I suggest you lose your sight. I also suggest you, if you care about your friends, and he named names. He said, I suggest you go back home. Go back where you came from. So this gentleman went to his friend's house who he was staying, and he said to his friends, I think I got to go. I don't want to bring any danger to you. Packed up his bags because he rode the bus down and he rode the bus back up. Went to the bus station, checked his bags, got on the bus. 20-hour ride home. He's thinking about this incident. Gets off the bus. Goes home. Unpacks his bags. And tucked inside his bag is the whip that the cop used, as a reminder of what? We do things differently here in the South. Now, I'm asking you to talk to me a little bit, just because I know, we get hope and we quiet here, right? But I want you to say something to me. When do you think that happened? It's a story. When do you think that happened? Somebody yell at me. 65? When? Give me anybody another guess? 5 years ago. Somebody said 09. I got something I want to show you. This is the whip. He said, man, I know you do a lot of talking. You think you could use this? I said, yeah, man. This story happened a little over a year ago. We want to say racism doesn't happen. You don't have to be afraid, JC. Some people ask me when I drive, how come I always keep a half a tank of gas in my car? This is why. This is why. Some people ask why when we first moved here, I had my wife look for the homes we lived in. This is why. And in South Dakota, you ain't gonna see a whip. You're gonna see the smile. And then when you turn your back, you're gonna hear nigger. You're gonna hear can't be trusted. You're gonna hear that kind of thing. Now, I'm telling you this for a reason. I'm not telling you this to point fingers. I'm just telling you that racism isn't some 1960 thing, that some of you who are younger than me read about in a book and listened to the tape of Martin Luther King. I'm 50 years old. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech isn't some study I did. I heard the speech. When Malcolm X got shot, I ran in my own neighborhood screaming, I'm black and I'm proud. As a little kid. 7, 8 years old. And I'm hoping, because I grew up in that area, this stuff is behind me. But when a guy, 62 years old, says, hey man, can you think you can use this to talk about how real racism still is? I said, yeah, I think I can do it. Okay, so I want you to think about, I think it's in the water. Now I'm going to say something radical that you won't often hear African American or Native American or Hispanic folks say. We all have a bias. White, black, red, whatever. Because in America, it's in the water. It's in the air. But it's more than just in America. See, here's the way we're wired. God wired us to connect and to fit into a group, to bond. What that also means is there's a us, a we, and a them. We do it in church. We do it in neighborhoods. It's for real. But I think it's based on fear. So my real question to you is, I want you to think about it. I'm going to read the story. Just then there was a religious scholar who stood up with a question to test Jesus. the teacher, what do you need to get eternal life? That's a tricky question because this guy's presuming something. He's presuming that there's something he can bring to bear to get the good stuff. He's also hoping that he can secure his future. Okay? The word there is really a crazy word. We call it eternal life. You thinking about when you die. But the word also means now. What do I need to do to live, to be a kingdom liver? To be somebody blessed and loved by God? Listen to what Jesus says. He answered, what's written in God's law? Now, the scribe was asking this. What's written in God's law? How do you interpret it? Scribe says, love the Lord your God with all your passion, your prayer, your muscle, and your intelligence. And that you love your neighbor as well as you do yourself. Jesus said to him, good answer. And what he's saying there is good doctrine. You answered doctrinally correct. You answered doctrinally correct. I can be doctrinally correct and spiritually wrong. I can be doctrinally correct, customarily correct, and spiritually so far from love that nobody can save me. He says, good answer. Do it and you'll live. Looking for a loophole, he asked the scribe, how and just how would you define, Jesus, neighbor? Jesus answered by telling the story. There once was a man traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho. Now I got to just squeeze in between there. It's about 2,300 miles. The terrain changes in terms of sea level difference. About, I read somewhere, almost 3,600 feet difference. And it's a 17 to 20 mile ride. Okay? So this road in Jesus' time was called the Red Way or the Bloody Way. Listen to why it was called that. On the way, he was attacked by robbers. They took his clothes, they beat him, and they went off, leaving him half dead. See, the Bloody Way was full of cliffs and turns and curves. And most people in that day didn't travel that road by themselves. Now, I might think this Jewish guy was a little bit either arrogant or stupid. Because most people traveled that way in groups. And this, as my friend would say, this fool was walking by himself or traveling by himself and got jumped, got taken down. Okay, then the text says, luckily, there was a priest on his way down the same road. But when he saw him, he angled across to the other side. The priest. Okay, and this is a Jewish priest. Jesus is messing with him bad already. So the good guy either would have been the victim, or now that he introduces the priest should have been the good guy. Only he angled across the street. So then he says there was a Levite, religious man, showed up. And the language there is, he had already been to Jerusalem, did his thing. The priest makes offerings for the people. The Levite takes care of the temple and ensures and enables the priest to do his thing. They both were on their way down, which means they were leaving Jerusalem, going to Jericho. And when the Levite saw him, then the Levite angled as well. Now Jesus flips the script. He says, the Samaritan traveling the road came on him. And when he saw the man's condition, his heart went out to him. He gave him first aid, disinfected, and bandaging his wounds. Then he lifted him onto his donkey, led him to an inn, made him comfortable, and in the morning took 2 silver coins and gave it to the innkeeper, saying, "Take care of him, and if it costs more, put it on my bill. I'll pay you when I come back." Now I'm telling you that scribe is looking at Jesus with his jaw on the ground, because he just did something that you wouldn't do. And then Jesus asked him the question, "What do you think? Who of the 3 became the neighbor to the man attacked by robbers?" Now listen to this. Now he named them: priest, Levite, Samaritan. Racism was so thick from Jews to Samaritans in that day. He said which one was the neighbor to the attacked man. He couldn't even say Samaritan. He couldn't even say it. He said the one who treated him kindly. And he probably said like this: the one who treated him kindly. Because he couldn't even believe Jesus flipped it like that. Jesus said, "Go and do the same." So let's look at this. We got 2 stories. We got the story of the encounter with the scribe, and we got the Good Samaritan story. And I want to teach. Kingdom living requires honest questions and responses. See, I'm thinking like this. When that scribe came and he asked Jesus the question exposed his bias. Jesus didn't chide him. Jesus challenged him. Kingdom living requires honest questions, honest responses. See, I'm not even thinking that the scribe was a bad guy. He just came and he said, "Hey, man, you know what? I want to get into the kingdom. I want to have heaven when it's all over, and I want to figure out how does a guy live a good life, and there must be something I can do." Only the problem was he didn't understand grace. He didn't understand there was nothing he could do to make heaven happen, either later or now. Exposes to questions. Now, if I ask good questions, honest questions, and I lay it out there, God promises He will meet us where we're at and change us. Let me tell you a story. Another story. 4th grade. I'm 9 years old. I moved to Denver. Live with my grandmother. Now, mind you, I'm 4th grade. It's 68, 69. And I'm moving to Denver. I'm growing up in a place that's all black, and all I've ever watched adults do is do racist stuff. Hate white people, complain about white people, be afraid of white people. Mostly be afraid of them. So I come to Denver, and a couple years after I get there, they decide to change the social culture. They decide to bus poor white students, not poor white students, actually rich white students into the poor black neighborhood, and poor black students into the white neighborhoods. Now, in my neighborhood, we did what we did. Now, I'm telling you this just to show you my bias, because it's changed. But my bias back then was I hated white folks on sight just because of what I saw them being able to do. Just because of the power. They were a threat. And if I got a chance to have an advantage, I was taking it. And my friends was taking it. And so while this busing was going on, there was fights. I went to the Catholic school. My best friends went to the public school. Now, having that attitude, I ran home from school every day while these fights were going on to see and laugh and partake in the fighting and harassing of white students as they got on the bus. That was my bias. See, the other thing is God calls us into a relationship. Jesus came to that scribe and he said, "I'm representing the Father." And the Father represents love. And when you encounter love, you give up your bias. It just changes your ability. when you encounter love, you begin to move from love instead of fear. Okay? It changed me. Okay? Changed me. But I had to ask and bring questions. I had to listen to questions as it changed me. A guy named Dan Bertram once, white kid, white Jewish kid. We're riding the bus. He says, JC, I got a question. So what is it, man? He said, well, if I ask you the question, you're going to kick my butt, man. I said, no, man, what's the question? Because when we rode the bus together, he looked like the dude on MASH, the little dude, what's his name? He looked like Radar, big old glasses, curly hair, and you know, he ain't gonna hurt nobody. And so we used to ride the bus together and talk about Earth, Wind, and Fire and black music. He loved black music, knew everything you could know about Stevie Wonder. He knew more than I knew about Stevie Wonder. So we sit on the bus talking about music. And he said, hey, man, I got a question for you. He said, you promise you ain't going to hit me on this bus when I ask the question? I said, yeah. He said, how come you and your boys call each other the N-word? But if I call you the N-word, you're going to knock me out. I couldn't answer the question. It was a great question. It challenged me. That was the beginning. So the legal lawyer, the religious lawyer says, hey, Jesus, what's up? You asked the question. Jesus says, what's the law say? Now, he pointed him to a little box on his wrist where they kept specific scriptures. And that particular scripture about love the Lord with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself, just so happened to be one of the scriptures in the box. So he pointed him to what Pharisees, what those guys would keep and memorize as this is the code. These are the way we should live. But here's the other thing I got to tell you. So Jesus challenges this guy, and then he tells him a story. Now, in the story, there is the traveler, there's the priest, the Levite, and the Samaritan. And I contend this. My second point is this. The presence of danger challenges the direction of your kingdom life. The presence of danger, the presence of threat, the presence of fear challenges you. Which way you going to go? What you going to do? Jesus tells the story, and he tells the story about the priest. Now there's some notions I read. I was looking at, okay, so why do you think the priest and the Levite crossed the street? And don't tell me get to the other side. Please don't tell me that. Why do you think they crossed the street? There's some speculation that the priest couldn't get dirty. He couldn't be found unclean. But the problem is he was on his way down to Jericho, which means he finished his business in Jerusalem. Why do you think the Levite, apparently, according to the language, got a little closer and crossed the street? Now, I might ask this question. Why would you or me cross the street? Why would you or me freeze? Say that again, D. I think what happens, the priest said, he asked the wrong questions. He said, if I stop and help this fool, what's going to happen to me? The Levite said the same thing. If I stop to help, what's going to happen to me? Now, Jesus flips it. Understand this. Samaritan, I put it in there with the words that it would equate with in the culture. Nigger, spit, trailer trash, Indian, drunk. That's the context for Samaritan. So when Jesus says good Samaritan, those two words don't go together. In their culture, those two words do not go together. He casts the priest as someone who neglects to care, the Levite who neglects to care for a fellow Jewish person, somebody in the family, somebody in the blood or in the religious. Here's my question to you. Here's the only time I'm going to ask you a pointed question. What is the name of your them? We sort people all the time. Those people make us feel comfortable, and those people that make you scared. If I take some of you to my neighborhood, how many of you would admit if I took you and you weren't with me, you'd be doing this? I don't see no hands up. How many would be? Now, some of you will walk in my neighborhood talking about, hey, how you doing? And I'll be telling you, shut up, don't talk to him. You will get killed. So, when I grew up, we used to see folks that come in, I call them do-gooders. They'd come in your neighborhood, and some of them would just be stupid. They'd go up to the most ugliest thug, like, how you doing? I'm like, they drive through my neighborhood. I had a lady one time in a Mercedes-Benz, which was really unique because we had all these beaters that drove in my neighborhood. This Mercedes-Benz come up the alley, and they're looking for a restaurant at the wrong time of night. First of all, the restaurant's closed, and she's driving a Mercedes-Benz. I said, lady, get home. You will have your Mercedes-Benz taken from you here. Okay? But everybody has their them. I have my them. That's a fear-based thing. Okay? Jesus is getting at the culture. He's saying the Samaritans require, even if you hate them, the Father's love will compel you to love them instead of hate them. The wall of hostility is removed. I'm asking you that question. Some of you say, well, I don't have no thems. I treat everybody with love and respect. Whatever. There is somebody. It don't have to be race. It don't have to be ethnicity. It could be, I hate Pentecostals. I hate Catholics. Or it could be socioeconomic. It could be those people that don't take care of themselves and work hard and go to work. What's wrong with them? Who's your them? Who's your them? Jesus is calling you right now today. It's easy to love the people that's in our family. It's easy to love the people that make us comfortable. But this story calls your customary opinions and intentions into question. He's saying, I'm flipping this thing. I'm challenging you to love the person that's disgusting. I'm challenging you to love the person that you're averse to. I'm challenging you to love the person that's hurt you. That's hurt you. What's the name of your them? The priest, the Levite, and me. Would you leave the comfort of the circle to risk it all? Would you? See, the priest knew. Now, here's the thing. It isn't like the priest went, nah, I ain't helping this whole goofball. I got some place to be. He also knew that the robbers, the Levite and the priest knew that the robbers would sometimes fake like they was hurt. Be laying, and then when you came, doing the help thing, you got pounced on. So there was real threat. Plus, they were on the bloody way. They knew danger. The Samaritan said, now I'm thinking this is a fellow who's walked this before. He knows the streets and he walks. But he risked it all. See, I think kingdom living, when we fall in love with the Father and he loves us back because we are reducing our filters. Kingdom living, those of us who are invested in the eternal now, living as if we're heaven citizens, living as if we're the Father's kids. We see our heart goes out. See, that's the other thing that was missing. With the Levite and with the priest, they don't say his heart went out. And they also don't say, in the NIV it says the Good Samaritan felt pity, which means deep sympathy, deep concern, deep compassion. They don't say that about the priest or the Levite. But when we encounter love, we risk it. He jumped down off his donkey, scooped this guy up. I read one commentary said what probably happened was the guy was all busted up, so he took off his shirt and ripped it into shreds and made some Band-Aids. He had a bottle of wine. He used his own wine that he'd been keeping as disinfectant. He had some oil. He used the oil as a salve to put over the wounds. He picked him up, gave up his donkey, put that guy on his donkey. Then he went back to the inn, made the reservation for this guy, laid down his own cash, and then said, if this ain't enough, I'll pay more. How invested are you in risking? If I said to you, do you know of opportunities where you stepped aside? You saw somebody who fit the them category in pain, and you did this. Or you became a bystander. You never know. See, I never knew. As I started to change, I got a scholarship to an all-white high school, Regis High School, 9th grade. And I was the only black student in that class of about 195 kids. And I'm looking around, and the first week I'm packing a little baseball bat in my bag, my gym bag. My grandma said, "What you gonna do with that baseball bat?" I said, "Somebody say something crazy, I'm gonna knock him out." She said, "Boy, you ain't no fighter. You gonna eat that baseball bat." I said, "Well, I'm gonna do something though." And she said, "Boy, you need to understand. You judge people by the character of their eyeballs, not the color of their skin." That was a program change. That's what Jesus was asking this guy to do. I want you to love based on what's in their heart. I want you to feel compassion for them. So I'm there a year. I start to build relationships. I start to build friendships. I have 3 really good friends. Now that's pretty bad, right? I shouldn't have said that, gave that away. Like I only had 3 friends. Now I had more friends than that, but I had a friend. One of my best friends was a guy named Billy Garnett. He was 6'10". When we were freshmen, he was 6'4". We played on the A team together. Then I had another cat his name was Rick DeRose. He was this Italian kid that thought he was the baddest dude in town. And another friend named Sean Bendel, who was this wrestling genius. He was a wrestler, IQ about 160. In his junior year, getting scholarships, getting letters from Harvard, Yale, and Ivy League guy. And in second year in college, came home and is doing construction. I mean, I'm like, Sean, what's up with that? Now, we hang out. We get to know each other. I'm always wondering, because my friend Billy started coming into my neighborhood because that's where the basketball players were. So one day, my senior year, I have a good game. I'm telling my grandma I'm having a good game. I'm finna go see my girlfriend. And Billy and Sean and Rick DeRose show up because they like my grandma. They show up, "Hey, grandma, what's up?" And they call the grandma at the house, and I come out the shower and they in my living room. "What y'all doing here?" And they was like, "We celebrating the win. We going to the championship for the districts." "Okay. And we want to tell your grandma how good you played." Blah, blah, blah. I said, "Okay." I said, "I'm finna go see my girlfriend, man. I'm glad you're here, but I'm going to see my girlfriend later." So they leave and I leave. And they leave before I do. They had parked in the alley. I'm getting ready. I open my door and head out the opposite way. I hear my friend Billy screaming, "Help, help." I always wondered, what would I do? If something went down in my neighborhood and my friends got attacked, would I help them? Would I watch it, or would I run away? You know what happens? When you have love, you don't think. You don't think along racial lines. I didn't think, well, okay, now if these was black dudes, I would probably help them. But these is 2 white dudes and an Italian. I got nothing for them. I didn't think like that. I heard my friend scream, who had become my neighbor. I ran downstairs. And at the time, Billy he was at my house because he couldn't play at a cast on. At the time, he was in the middle of the alley on his back, protecting himself, and the guy was hitting him. I grabbed this black guy off of him, and when the black guy turned around, he was shocked to see it was me. I said, "That's my friend, man. Get off of him." Now, while I'm pulling him off, my grandma comes downstairs. Now, you got to know my grandma's crazy. She's 4'11", ain't scared of nothing. So she's in the middle of it, yelling at people. "You better leave these boys alone." And blah, blah. I'm like, "Grandma, go back upstairs. You're finna get me killed. I don't know why I'm out here right now anyway," right? So we go to the car, and there's another dude shaking his fist with a beer in his hand. And the two toughest guys in Regis High School sitting in the car talking about, we thought it was a gun. It was a beer can he had in his hand. He was like, "You better come out." I was laughing at him. All the rest of that, our senior year, I'm like, "Don't tell me nothing about being tough." Because one dude had you both in the car, and your dude's out there getting beat up. My grandma had to come get him off of you. So we get the dudes off and get Billy and them in the car. And the funny part of this is we're going upstairs. Now those dudes drove off and my adrenaline's coming down and I'm standing out there and these two dudes is yelling at me like, "What's up with you? You know, blah, blah, you, Uncle Tom," and all this kind of stuff. And my grandma will shut up. "You better leave him alone. He ain't scared of you." I said, "Grandma, go upstairs. You finna get me killed now. I'm trying to ease out of here now. I'm trying to go back upstairs." But here's my question. I didn't think I'd risk it. I didn't think I'd risk it. Would you? That's what love does. Jesus says, the Samaritan felt deep pity. The Samaritan's heart went out. And when you feel compassion, when you look across the room and you don't see black, white, but you see another human being that has red blood. See, racism is built on the notion that blacks and Jews are a whole different species. If you talk to an Aryan person, that's what they think. They think that you shouldn't intermarry because you will create these beasts because they're different. But the interesting thing is we all think that. If I grow up in a neighborhood where I've never seen a black person, that person's an alien to me. They may as well have pointed ears and green and have 3 fingers because I know nothing about them. When I went to Regis, all my friends asked me questions because we had never really been around white people. For weeks, I got white people questions. "Hey, man, so how do they get their hair to stand up like that? Hey, man, so like do they press their jeans like we do?" You know, I was like the informant because we didn't know anything about it. And then I started bringing folks to my house, and my friend was like, "What's up with you, man?" I said, "These are my friends." It changed. And then and what I found out with God is He keeps putting me in places where I have to be a part of racial change. I have to be a part of racial change. That's been part of my deal. So when Mike asked me to speak, for real, I wasn't really offended by the fact that he only asked the black dude to do it. Because that's my call. Like, I feel like my job is to say to people, you know, look at me as a human being. But if you have a bias, own it. Because I'm going to tell you I can smell it. And then when if you were one of my bias, when I interact with you, you can smell it because it smells like fear. Perfect love casts out what? Perfect love. Not my perfect love, His perfect love. Right? So my question to you. Kingdom living compels us to be willing to sacrifice. Are you? Are you willing to sacrifice your conventional opinion of them? Are you willing to be challenged to find out that your stereotype might just be that, a stereotype, and have no real knowledge to it? Are you willing, not only, here's the thing, the practical application, kingdom living, love compelled living, demands that we reach across the dividing wall to the people that are strangers and aliens and enemies in our life. Love demands. Now, with that, I don't mean that you should. I'm just saying when you fall in love with the Father that falls in love with you, fear starts to slip away. And you find yourself in the alley fighting for somebody you didn't think you would fight for. You find yourself, like I did, in an arena with 300 people and we're going around doing mixers, which I hate the mixers. You know, you turn your back to people and they ask you to think about things you want to say, and you turn around. And I go to this mixer about 4 years ago, and this guy says, I got you. We turn our backs, and the speaker's asking us to think about some questions. And when I turn, I notice this man has a long ponytail, gentle eyes. But see, me, I'm always looking at everything. I happen to look down, and from here to here, from here to here, and on his legs is all Aryan stuff. Swastikas, 666, KKK, all kinds of stuff. I turn and look at him, and see, when I get afraid, I freeze. I couldn't even think. I'm like, oh, what just happened here? No, you didn't, God. Put me back to back with this dude. And he looked at me, he said, yeah, man. He said this to me. He said, 3 years ago, I would have hurt you. I would have had to. He looks at me with tears and he said, but I'm different. I look back at him and I start to cry too, because I'm still realizing my own response to him. And I'm thinking, more than 3 years ago, me and you'd have been fighting, or I'd have got my buddy to fight you. But I'm different now. In that moment, you got two grown men standing there crying because there was a time we couldn't stand back to back. Love compels you to stand back to back. Love compels you to do also what the Samaritan did. The Samaritan gave his clothes because of love. He gave his wine because of love. He gave his oil because of love. He gave his money because of love. And he gave his time. As I call the worship team forward, here's my question. This series is ending here. But my question to you is this. Are you willing, one, to deal with your objections to the Father's love? Because as you come to understand love, know this. It isn't an if. It's a when. Know this. That if you have the audacity to embrace the Father's love, He will stand you back to back with someone who was your enemy, with someone who was a them. And He will inspire you to show love. That's what Martin Luther King said. Martin Luther King wrote a piece and he said, the white man is distorted by the disease of separation. His soul is scarred. And he said, but what that requires is that the Negro, as he said in his day, the Negro is required. The salve for that is that the Negro look into a white man's eyes and love them. See, the salve for hostility is love. The salve for hostility is acceptance. The salve for hostility is to see you and you see me as broken sheep on the same road, following a shepherd who's taking us to heaven. Worship team, do your thing. Dear Father, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for life. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your Son that you sent to challenge us to live as if we're in the kingdom, to live from the motive of love. Help us to come to understand how deeply and how far you go to show us that you love us, that we may extend love to others, that we may not only extend love to those who are family and friends, but we extend love to the stranger, to the alien, and to our enemies. These things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. You're free to go.